Hey, everybody. Welcome to our International Hangout. We're excited to get to talk to people all over the world instead of just the ones that are next door.
Yeah.
I'm Stephenie Meyer. This is Megan Hibbett with me as usual, our little quarantine gang here. Uh, and so I'm going to do a reading, and I was looking at different sections to read. And I didn't want to do something at the very end. I know not every translation is out yet, so I don't want to do any spoilers, but what I decided to read is the piece going into the meadow that is missing from Twilight, that I was really excited to finally put into place. So I'm going to begin as they reach the meadow. Bella led the way now, no hesitation as she pushed through the hedge of ferns and into the meadow. I wished I could see her face. I could imagine how lovely the place would be on a day like this. I could smell the wildflowers, sweeter in the warmth, and hear the low burble of the stream on the far side. The insects hummed and faraway birds trilled and crooned. There were no birds nearby now. My presence was enough to frighten all the larger life from this place. She walked almost reverently into the golden light. It gilded her hair and made her fair skin glow. Her fingers trailed over the taller flowers, and I was reminded again of Persephone, springtime personified. I could have watched her for a very long time, perhaps forever, but it was too much to hope that the beauty of the place could make her forget the monster in the shadow for long. She turned, eyes wide with amazement, a wondering smile on her lips, and looked back at me, expectant. When I didn't move, she began walking slowly in my direction. She lifted one arm, offering her hand in encouragement. I wanted to be human so badly in that moment that it nearly crippled me. But I was not human, and the time had come for perfect discipline. I held my palm up, a warning. She understood, but was not afraid. Her arm dropped, and she stayed where she was, waiting, curious. I took a deep breath of the forest air, consciously registering her scorching scent for the first time in hours. Even trusting Alice's visions as much as I did, I wasn't sure how there could be any more to this story. It would have to end now, wouldn't it? Bella would see me and be all the things she should have been from the beginning, terrified, disgusted, appalled, repelled, and done with me. It felt as though would never do anything more difficult than this, but I forced my foot to lift and shifted my weight forward. I would face this head on. With all that, I couldn't bear the first reaction on her face. She would be kind, but it would be impossible for her to disguise that initial instant of shock and revulsion. So I would give her a moment to compose herself. I closed my eyes as I stepped into the sunlight. I felt the sun warm against my skin, and I was glad I couldn't see that either. I didn't want to look at myself now. For the longest half second I'd ever lived through, everything was silent, and then Bella screamed, "Edward!" My eyes flashed open, and I fully expected to see her running away from all that I had just revealed myself to be. But she was running right at me in a collision course, her mouth open in distress. Her hands were half extended toward me, and she tripped and stumbled her way through the long grass. Her expression wasn't frightened, but it was desperate. I didn't understand what she was doing. I couldn't let her crash into me, whatever she was intending. I needed her to keep her distance. I raised my hand again, palm forward. She faltered, then wobbled in place for a moment, exuding anxiety. As I stared into her eyes, saw my reflection there, I thought perhaps I understood. Mirrored in her eyes, what I resembled most was a man on fire. Though I debunked her myths, she must have held on to some of them subconsciously. Because she was worried, frightened for the monster rather than of it. She took a step toward me, then hesitated when I moved a half step back. "Does that hurt you?" she whispered. Yes, I'd been right. She wasn't afraid for herself, not even now. "No," I whispered back. She stepped another foot closer. Careful now. I let my hand fall. She still wanted to be closer to me. Her expression shifted as she approached. Her head cocked to the side, and her eyes first narrowed, then grew huge. Even with this much space between us, I could see the effects of the light refracting off my skin, shining prism-like against her own. She moved another step, and then another, keeping the same distance away as she slowly circled around me. I stayed completely motionless, feeling her eyes touch my skin as she moved out of my sight. Her breath came more quickly than usual. Her heart pumped faster. She reappeared on my right, and now there was a tiny smile beginning to form around the edges of her lips as she completed her circle and faced me again. How could she smile? She walked closer, stopping when she was only 10 inches away. Her hand was raised, curled close to her chest, as if she wanted to reach out and touch me, but was afraid to do, but was afraid to. The sunlight shattered off my arm and whirled against her face. "Edward," she breathed. There was wonder in her voice. "Are you frightened now?" I asked quietly. It was as if my question was totally unexpected, as if it shocked her. No. I stared into her eyes, unable to stop myself from fruitlessly trying again to hear her. She reached toward me, very slowly, watching my face. I thought perhaps she was waiting for me to tell her to stop. I didn't. Her warm fingers grazed the back of my wrist. She stared intently at the light that danced from my skin to hers. What are you thinking? I whispered. In this moment, the constant mystery was once again acutely painful. She shook her head slightly and seemed to struggle for words. I am. She stared up into my eyes. I didn't know. She took a deep breath. I've never seen anything more beautiful, never imagined something so beautiful could exist. So that's a little piece of the meadow that was missing before that I'm very happy to have back in place.
Can I just say quickly before we get into questions, I don't think we have been working together for a long time. 100 years, it feels like. 100 wonderful years. I have never heard you read before.
Oh, well, I have read before, mostly when traveling abroad, because audiences in Europe and have been more interested in that. So this is something that they appreciate there.
Since I am quarantining with you, I have a new nighttime request. I would like for you to read me a chapter of Midnight Sun.
No, I won't do it.
That was really nice.
Okay, well,
okay,
let's get to your questions.
Okay, disclaimer, I'm going to do my level best on your guys' names. So I practiced last night, but if I get them wrong, I'm so sorry. Hopefully I get close. Okay, starting off with, I think, Leva. Do you expect a lot of new fans for the Twilight series who have maybe read Midnight Sun first, or do you think Midnight Sun is just for the seasoned fans?
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't sure even the seasoned fans were going to want it, and they did. So that was really awesome. I didn't expect a ton of new readers. This felt like something that the seasoned fans had been asking for and requesting for a while. And that they would be primarily the ones reading it. So I don't know. I'm fascinated by the idea of someone coming at this from Edward's perspective first. I would love to talk to that person. If it does get more people reading, that's awesome. Anything that gets people reading anything is great. So we'll see. I haven't yet run into anyone who said I read Midnight Sun first to talk to.
This is from Priscilla. From what perspective did you enjoy writing the most, Bella or Edward?
Bella is a lot healthier mental state to be in. She, particularly when writing Twilight, I mean, New Moon was no fun for anybody, but in Twilight, she is falling in love for the first time with someone who's so amazing that just, she can't even comprehend this person. So there was a lot of wonder and joy in writing her story. And while Edward feels the same things, first love, wonder, joy, it's so out of balance with his self-loathing and his feeling that he's destroying everything and that he's ruining her life and that everything he's doing is inexcusable. And what is he doing? The stress and anxiety that he feels, I had to channel. So that wasn't fun. It's part of why it took so long to write. It just was difficult. So I definitely would prefer writing from Bella's perspective. And that's why I'm not going to do more stories from Edward's perspective. It's too hard.
That's a question for later. This is from Laura, sort of tying to this previous question. How easy was it for you to get back into the heads of your Twilight characters after so long?
I didn't really feel like I had to get back into them because I had never really left. Though this took me a million years, it's not something that I shelved for 10 years and then came back to and wrote in a year. This is something that I've been writing for 12 years. It just was a really, really long process. So I was never fully separated. While the movies were going on, that kind of kept us in a Twilight headspace, although an unusual one. It's not like the writing headspace, but definitely you're with the characters all the time. And then after that was done, I would go back to Midnight Sun and work on it. And I'd think about it when I wasn't working on it. So I don't feel like I've ever left that place.
This is from, I'm hoping I get it right, Tiffen. Which chapter are you most looking forward to the fans discovering?
Well, the bit I just read was something I was excited for people to get to. It's right in the middle of stuff that everyone already knows, but that was exciting to have there. I loved writing the race scene where they're trying to get to Bella in the dance studio before she gets murdered. And I think that'll be a fun one to read because it's very fast paced. When I was writing, it was like, like there was a beat going the whole time. Sometimes there was because I had the music on, but that was, I love the pace of that chapter.
Speaking of the pace of writing that chapter, you also paced it out physically in a car.
I did. I had my brother who drives stick take me out in his car, and so I could watch him shift through the different gears and when that would happen. And I would mark off. I mean, every time I have to drive on that freeway a lot. And every time I'm on it, I'm like, that's where his mirror shatters. That's where this happens. This is where they flip the car. And that always, I mean, that kind of was one of the things that kept me writing, was I had that so clearly in my head, I had to get there.
She says that they only went over the speed limit
by a normal amount.
I don't believe it, because I know how fast she drives on a normal day to Target. This is from Tony. In the final draft, were there any characters or maybe a scene that was edited out or scrapped that you wish you had played more with?
No, not really. It's kind of the opposite. Like every little piece, every flashback that I wrote, I would be like, is there room for this here? Should I put it in? And then I'd be like, yeah, we'll just put everything in. The chapter that from Alice's perspective, mostly of chores, of the things they have to do to make Bella's attack look like an accident. I wondered if it was too exposition heavy. I had so much fun, like looking at her process of how she is so infallible, how she makes all the right decisions and covers all her bases by already going through it in her mind, that she has to kind of play with it. And Megan read it and I said, and she said, no, put it in. So everything just got put in. So she is part of the reason why that was put in, although mostly I just was throwing in all of it. So
well, just hearing you talk about everything that had to be done was exciting to me. So
it was a lot. It was hard. It's hard to clean up a crime scene, man. Yeah. Don't commit crimes. It's too much work.
This is from Signa. What other storyline besides Edward and Bella would you like to possibly explore in the future?
Well, in the future is a good choice of words, because I'm not going to go back to the story that's already written anymore. So if you're talking about, Alice and Jasper or Carlisle and Esme, I'm not going to go back and write those stories. I feel like it's all just, that time period I've dealt with enough. So going forward, I plan to write from Renesmee's point of view. And I know that when Breaking Dawn came out, a lot of people were surprised to have a baby. That was not what they were expecting. But I was giving birth to my next narrator. And I always knew that, because once Bella becomes a vampire, she kind of loses that fish out of water, right? She's one with everybody and she's powerful, and it's not the same. For me, it's a little harder to write because I am not powerful and I don't know what it feels like to be, kind of invulnerable. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I was going to need another narrator who doesn't fit in everywhere. It's kind of one of a kind and doesn't know her spot, and who isn't as invulnerable as everyone else around her. So I knew that was where I was going to go. And then my other narrator would probably be Leah Clearwater, because she has a lot of story ahead for her.
Oh, I love Leah. I would also say, if you haven't, we have a show and tell. The guide is a good place to find a lot of the backstories for the other characters, and also some of those stories got turned into movies or little short films for an event we did a couple of years ago called the Storytellers. I think it was like New Voices of the Twilight Saga. It was a very long title.
It was with women in film and with Tongal and with
Lionsgate.
Yes, and the point of it was to encourage female filmmakers and writers to find their way into the business, get some connections. And they made some really great, insightful pieces that are a lot of fun to kind of explore that.
You can find them on YouTube. We'll probably throw a post up at some point. So you
on my website, so they have them together. Yeah.
Okay, this is from Kate. This question might be my favorite question. It legit made me LOL. And it's gonna make me do it again. In Twilight, Bella tells Edward she doesn't want to bring the FBI down on the Cullen family. And Edward makes a comment alluding to the fact that it wouldn't be the first time. She was hoping to get an answer in Midnight Sun, but they did not. And so she really needs to know when did the Cullens and the FBI cross paths?
Well, so firstly, in that moment, it wasn't something that I could deal with a flashback. There's too much happening. It's too quick. Edward is panicking hard. He doesn't have time to flashback. So that's why that wasn't there. Then in the, but for your question, so it wasn't so much the FBI that Edward is referring to, although I'm sure they were involved at certain points. This is just like human authorities, right? Because in the past, more than once, many times, members of their family have committed murder. And so in some ways, it's really easy to cover that up, right? Because as a vampire, I think you get to see a little bit of this in Bree Tanner's story, where you just rip a rock up from the floor of the sea and put a body under it. It's never going to be found, right? So the body can be dealt with, disappeared. There's not going to be evidence, but there's still a missing person. And if you have a group nearby who's a little strange, especially, I mean, I guess things haven't changed that much, but you know, we kind of think of in past times, oh, the strangers in town, they're new, you know, they're probably up to something. So there would be fingers pointed at those weird, pretty people that no one really understands. So they couldn't really sit around. I mean, they could do a round of questioning, but eventually they're going to disappear. And they know how to do that. So I'm sure at some point the FBI, especially if Emmett had gone on like a tear or something and there's a bunch of people missing, Jasper has problems. The FBI would have come in and they would just have disappeared. They know how to disappear. They're not super attached to any one place because they know, you know, wait 40 years and you can come back and no one knows it's you.
I was surprised to learn that answer.
She, for some reason, was under the impression that Jasper didn't kill a lot of people. I felt like that was really obvious.
I knew that he had killed a lot of people, but I thought that it had like significantly tapered off by the time he got to the Cullens.
Yes, it has tapered off because he used to kill a lot more people. But he's had there's been a lot of people that die. It's not, bad things happen.
That's true.
She likes Jasper so much that she's willing to excuse everything.
That's right. No, not everything. Just
just murder.
I thought he'd come further. Okay, this is from Josie. Was there a version, speaking of Bree, was there a version of the manuscript, any clips where Bree was not killed by Felix? And yeah, I'll leave it there.
There wasn't. When I was writing the end of Eclipse and I invented Bree, you know, I had just brought, I was just going to be a newborn to give us the information we needed. I named her Bree actually after a reader that I knew at the time, and I had kind of peppered their names in. So Bree was a real person who did not die. But fictional Bree was a story device, and I already knew what was going to happen in Breaking Dawn. So I knew there wasn't another character in that mix. It was pretty solid. And I didn't miss her. I mean, I felt bad for her in the moment. Like she becomes very human all of a sudden as you're writing that, and Bella's experiencing it through her, not just kind of like, oh, newborn, am I going to be like that? But also just, here's a young girl that they're going to murder. I mean, it's hard, but then later I went and wrote the second life of Bree Tanner, and fell in love with Bree and Diego and had to kill them because there was no other way. But that was hard to do. I wished at that point that there had been another version, that she had escaped somehow, but you know, the story was set in stone at that point. But I didn't know how much I wanted it until I wrote her story.
Well, I remember feeling kind of sad too that the actress who played Bree, Jodelle, was so sweet,
so adorable.
We felt
made it worse, definitely.
Felt really bad. Like maybe no, she's gotta die. It's very sad. Okay, this is from Deeksha. At what moment did Edward first think of asking Bella to marry him, which led to his impromptu proposal did that lead to the impromptu proposal at the end of New Moon?
We had a discussion yesterday about what impromptu means exactly, because it isn't an impromptu proposal, because on the one hand, he thought of it in that moment. He's like, oh, maybe this is how I slow her down. And it's kind of lame that his first proposal was in response to her being like, change me now. And it's like a device rather than as heartfelt as he means it. But it doesn't come up in Midnight Sun because while he kind of fantasizes about her getting married at some point, it's never to him. And he knows that he'll never love anyone else, that he'll love her as long as he exists, and that she will always be that to him because of how vampires work. And so once he comes back in New Moon and has decided he is going to live with her for her human life, he absolutely plans on marrying her. That's how it's done. You fall in love, you get married. This is how he was raised. There weren't other options in his brain that the modern world has provided the rest of us. So it wasn't like he had never thought about proposing to her. He had actually thought quite a bit about proposing to her, even that soon after coming back. But in that moment, it was more about having her stop and think about something else for half a minute, because he just wants her to not make a choice she can't go back on. He wants her to really think it through.
Edward.
And she wouldn't have liked a big flowery proposal anyway.
No, it's definitely, and that's one of the benefits. We have a lawnmower. We should probably.
Oh no.
Should we shut the window?
Yeah, let me. Oh, so sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, when he after he proposed, so you have to push in the bottom. I'm gonna have to do this. Hold on, just a second.
I got it.
Okay, and then slide this. We got it. Sorry, lawnmowers. But yeah, he learns a lot from that experience about what he can expect from Bella and what will actually make her happy. He's used to being around Rosalie, and Rosalie is all about the big, giant thing.
I'm gonna ask another question really quick, and then I'm gonna go see if we can shut off the lawnmower.
I will email text about that right now.
Okay, this is from Vicky in Ireland, and this is a great question. The twist in the Breaking Dawn Part 2 film with the alternate ending really threw her and literally everyone else as we experienced in the movie theater. Was that something that you came up with and wanted to add to the story, or was it added by the film team?
Okay.
We were the film team.
We were a small but pivotal part of the film team. Originally, as we were, you're gonna have to get the other window.
Okay. Keep going.
Originally, I didn't have a lot of say over things, and as the movies progressed, I was able to get more. I was able to be listened to more, which was great because I felt like I was protecting your interests as well as mine. So then we get to the end of Breaking Dawn, and we're working on the script, and they're like, we have to have a big fight. It has to happen. I'm like, but it doesn't happen, because if it happens, guess what? Everybody dies. And I don't want to kill them, because I would like to do more books in this series with these characters. So if we kill them all in the movies, and then I write the book that is the actual sequel to this, you'll have killed all the characters before you can make the movie. And they're like, well, we have to have something. And I tried to talk them into the fact that, it's a standoff. This is how we walk away alive. This is how we get the happy ending for this chapter. And they weren't having it. So I sat down with the writer, we went to dinner, and we just hashed out every possibility. I am happy with the compromise we came up with, although it's not perfect, because obviously everybody who is knowledgeable about this, the story, knows that Alice couldn't have seen that vision. It's impossible if she had, because the werewolves are super involved in what's going down. So if there was a vision, it would have to be super spotty, and like there'd be big holes of what was happening. And I don't think one would be possible, but I decided to just deal with that, let it go, because, there was the only compromise we could come up with. And then we got to have the fun of figuring out what the fight would look like if it had gone that way. And it was very close, so it could have. And that was super exciting, because getting to think about how that would have gone down and where and how people would die without having to actually kill them was super fun. That doesn't sound fun, but it really was. And I missed some of the stuff that we had planned that we didn't get because of time. I remember back at the time, there was a lot of watching of different fight scenes in movies for how long they are, and trying not to go super long. But there was this great shot that we called it the carousel shot. and it was going to be like everyone frozen in time, Matrix style, moving just slightly, and we were going to get a 360 as everyone converged on Arrow. And actually, Edward would have been killed in that moment, just getting Bella there before they could kill her to be the one to get rid of Arrow. It was a really cool scene. I wish it was there.
Did you talk? I'm going to be out of breath now because I was running around the house. We did not prepare for the lawnmower.
We were not.
We were prepared for everything else. Okay. Did you talk about the reaction in the audience?
No.
Okay. I think one of the best things I've ever experienced in Twilight fandom was that premiere, because nobody knew it was. We were able to keep that on lockdown, which was great. And when that scene came on, everyone in the theater just had a physical and audible
Well, it's the moment
reaction
when Carlisle jumps at Arrow and Arrow rips his head off, and everyone just went, "What?"
Yeah.
That was fun.
We were all kind of high-fiving each other.
Yeah, it was funny.
Okay. Francesca, vampire habits you describe are unique in particular. And she says that they are all good and caring individuals who don't want to hurt anyone. Not all of them.
I mean, the Cullens.
Yeah. What importance did it have for you to distinguish your vampires from those that you've seen in TV or movies or other books?
I didn't think to myself, I'm going to write a book about vampires. I'm going to make mine super different. I mean, that's not how the initial writing went down. I had a cool dream and I wrote it down, and all of the kind of aspects of vampires go back to that dream I had, where it starts with him, how I just described him reacting to the light rather than being burned to a cinder. And that was part of my subconscious came up with that. So then as I moved forward with them, I kind of took my cue from, they're made of a stone-like substance. They're unchanging. They're that, and the super strong, but also they couldn't sleep because they're unchanging. So that means conscious, always conscious. And so a lot of things came from that dream. And then as I was going through mythology with Bella and kind of like, what is the mythology? Because my level of mythology was very, very basic. It was just, okay, vampires are burned in the sun, vampires sleep in coffins all day, vampires drink blood. I mean, I really didn't look into all the different versions of other people's mythologies. And I'm glad I didn't. I liked coming up with my own thing that felt interesting to me. And then also the beauty of writing about fictional characters is you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So when you're writing stories, don't get yourself locked into, well, in this movie, the Swamp Man can do this. No, Swamp Man's not real. Swamp Man can do whatever you want him to do. It's really fun to make your own mythology. That's one of my favorite things is making a world where the rules are mine. So while I didn't decide to do it, I wouldn't do it any other way.
This is from Miri, maybe Mary. I hope I'm close. How would you feel about actually living in the world you've created for the Twilight series?
Well, the fun thing about the Twilight series is we could be living in it. It's kind of like the Matrix, where everything, Forks is a real place, Earth that is described as we live in it. The only thing that's different is the existence of these people that normal humans would never know about. It would never be something that we would ever be aware of. And so it could be real. So I think to live in this series would be pretty much like living in the real world, unless you happen to stumble across a vampire, which then wouldn't be very good.
No. Well, I guess it depends which vampire.
Yeah, but in general,
yeah,
the vast majority of them you wouldn't want to. So I wouldn't want to live in that world just because, higher chance of dying.
This is sort of similar. Ava would like to know, if you could become one of the characters in the saga yourself, which one would you like to be and why?
It's tricky because my first gut response is Alice, because it'd be super cool to kind of know what's coming, but then you don't actually get to, I feel like she doesn't get to engage as much with the present as the rest of us. And she's kind of living halfway between here and there. And I think it isolates her a little, and then there's Edward, because then you could just you'd know everything. And that would be great, except you'd know things you didn't want to know. And that wouldn't be great.
Oh, I could not handle that.
Yeah.
My mental health would not.
So I'm not sure. You know, maybe there's a side character. I mean, Siobhan, it would be really interesting because she actually can affect outcomes. That would be kind of a cool talent. And she lives an okay life, although she kills people, which maybe I don't want to do. I don't know. It's a really tough one.
And this is also kind of similar. Calliope would like to know, is there any resemblance between your own personality and that of any of the characters in your books?
Probably the one I'm closest to is Edward. Um, Not because I have all of his perfections, but I have all of his flaws. um, he is super anxious. He has intrusive thoughts about horrible things happening to the people he loves. All of that kind of was birthed in my crazy brain because I deal with that pretty frequently. Um, and then he's a huge pessimist, which maybe comes out of the other two. And I'm a big pessimist. And I actually think I look at it in a positive light. I am constantly happily surprised because things always go better than I think they will, because I think they're going to go horribly.
Like a lawnmower.
Well, worse things could happen. And trust me, I've imagined them. So his kind of mindset of everything is awful. that comes from me. Bella's more optimistic, sunny view of life is not my natural state.
Alexander would like to know, which of your books was the most difficult to write?
Well, Midnight Sun, for sure. Super, super easy one there. It was hard because on the one hand, Edward, stress and anxiety and having to work through that. But much harder than that was dealing with lines and actions already being laid out in a way that I couldn't change. And so not being able to be creative and to invent things as I'm going, that's what fuels me as a writer. And so being locked into, now he has to raise his hand like this. And then he's going to turn and look to here. And I have to give a reason for all of it without being able to create any of it. And it was so frustrating. So there were many, many times that I shut the computer, walked away and said, well, I'm not coming back to that. I'm done. And then 3 nights later, I'd be in the shower and be like, oh, I could do that. I'll go write it down.
What about books outside of the saga? Were any of those
No,
difficult?
those were not difficult. I mean, the host took a while. It was longer and it was more thought-provoking for me. Like I had to think about the meaning of what it means to be human and what it means to be human in a bad way and a good way. And so that, and it was a longer book, not as long as Midnight Sun, which is endlessly long. But it was exciting. I was creating the story. I didn't always know exactly where it was going to go, and that makes it a lot of fun. So no, that wasn't difficult.
A lot of people have questions about your writing process.
Okay.
So we're going to ask some of those questions. Katerina would like to know, she also is writing stories. Does it ever happen that for you, it's hard to make a decision? Like you already have a plot for your main character and how she should look like or act, but something changes.
I don't have a hard time with decision making. Generally, characters come to me fairly fully formed. I mean, there are things that can change. There's a character that's pretty new in my brain from a story that just recently came to me, and I've been kicking around, what does she look like? I feel like I know who she is as a person. And originally, I kind of imagined her with very dark skin and hair, and her parents kind of coming from very different places, and they would look different, and she looks less like her siblings than she does like her mother. And I think that's how she'll settle in. But I was, this is a fantasy novel. So then there's the elements of like, what if they have purple hair? Do I want to write purple hair? Probably not. Maybe that feels too strange. It'll make the world feel less relatable because it is going to be a completely different world. So she'll probably look like the way I first imagined her. They usually do. It's rare that I'll go back and say, this isn't what I want this character to look like, because generally just the way they come is fine. And they drive the story and make the decisions, which sounds like a crazy person would say that the people in my head are calling the shots, but it's true. Once they are who they are, then their decisions come out of who they are, and I don't have a lot of say over it.
You covered the next two questions
Oh, good.
from Arnika and Paulina, which were, you know, basically how you come up with character and do you, this is sort of.
Well, I'll how I come up with character, because I didn't really, let me answer your question. So like my first characters came to me in a dream. So the subconscious, I think, actually has a ton to do with my writing. But like for the host, for example, I was on a long drive talking to myself because there was no one else but little kids. And I had the idea kind of all of a sudden, like, why am I thinking about that? Here it is. What if you had two personalities in one body and both of them separately in love with someone? And so there was that little germ of a story that just got started. And then it was like, who are these people? And as I'm just sitting there, they're evolving, because I didn't want to do it actually, like multiple personalities is something very specific and a lot of times misunderstood. And I wanted such a divide that they were totally different people. And so then the aliens start coming into it, and then I'm visualizing them, because I'm seeing, okay, I've got this one body and she's got to be a survivor of the aliens. What does she look like? What is she like? And then I have the alien who's such a different mindset and coming from a totally different place. And so what is she like? And it was kind of fun because she doesn't look like anything, right? She looks like whatever host she has. And that was a lot of fun and they just it kind of comes like, as I'm thinking about what the story needs. Same with this new one I was just talking about. There was a mythology point that I'm like, what if in this world this happens? And that's like, okay, who's going to tell me about the world? And then she was just there. Like, and that's what and this is who this person is. And I love that. I love when characters kind of occur to you. And that's usually, I don't generally have to work really hard for characters. There are a lot of people in my head.
Oh, you talked about the host, and I just saw a question pop up from Christina. She's wondering about the sequels to the host.
Well, it looks like, when will they be published? Well, they have to be written first. Part of the sequel is written. I'm having a lot of trouble with a desire to go back to it. Not because I don't like the story. I like the story. I know the story too well. Like, it's really obvious to me, this is what has to happen. This is the plot, and there's no wiggle room. And I've imagined it so many times that I just have it laid out. And so I've talked myself into the same corner I was in with Midnight Sun. Like, I know too well what happens. There's no room to create. But it is something that I'm going to have to push for. Right now, I want to write a new world, with new mythology and a new place. I need a palate cleanser. Yeah. But then that's something I want to do because it is a good story. I like the story. I just need to force myself through it.
Pauline would like to know what your writing setup is. Do you wait for inspiration, or do you force yourself to write every day?
I don't force myself to write every day. When I'm in a good writing zone, I'll say, okay, this is what I'm doing today. But like right now, I'm doing a lot of promotion. I've been doing editing from the beginning of December through till April. And then it was, so I've been really caught up in Midnight Sun promotion and the launch and everything, and that takes up a lot of mental space. And so sometimes I can write while I'm editing. If it's a long enough editing process, I did write the host kind of in between editing stints because I needed a break. But right now, some of it is the age of my kids. When they were little and I didn't have adults to talk to, I needed to talk to my imaginary friends more. Now I have them with me for like this brief period of time, and so I'm more focused on being with them. But as we start to separate and get back to school, I'm going to go back into my weird writing coma where I don't really talk to people. I'm not super social, and it's not great for my family. So I kind of have to do it in periods of time. If I could wake up in the morning, sit down at my computer and working from 8 until noon, take a lunch break, and then working from 1 until 5, that would be amazing. But my brain just doesn't work that way.
Well, it's also not necessarily how the creative process happens too.
Well, it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
But I have to go deep and not be interrupted by real world stuff. And not everybody can afford to do that, right? Most people have a day job and everything. I'm lucky, so I can go into a writing coma when I want to, but it's hard.
It's sort of Anna's question. You touched on this a little bit, but where do you find the inspiration to write?
I mean, the inspiration is everywhere. I have so many stories. It's the time and the focus to write that are my stumbling blocks.
What Elena would like to know, what advice you would give to an aspiring writer?
My advice is to write. Like, don't worry about publishing. Don't worry about how it's going to be received. Write for yourself, write something you love to read. Like if you weren't excited when you start reading, when you go back and start reading through it again, if you're not excited to see what comes next, maybe you're not on the right track. Write something that makes you really into it. And like, it should be the best book you've ever read because you've done it specifically for yourself. It should hit all of your buttons and be what you want better than any book has before. And if it's not doing that, then think about what would really appeal to you. Don't try to write for anybody else. Write for you and write as much as you can. And don't worry about any of the rest of it until your stories are done. And then try and publish and whatnot, but like write for yourself.
Andrea would like to know, I know this is a tricky question for you, but I think it's kind of an inspiring answer. How does it feel to know that you've inspired a whole generation to write?
I mean, it is, there's two prongs to that. One, in one level, it's like, that's amazing. That's awesome. Because I like reading books and I run out of them. And so if you guys are out there writing books that I'm going to want to read, that's nothing but a win. The little bit of negative comes in from the way I react to a book I really love. I don't read a book and say that I love and look at it and say, I could do that. I read that book and say, I could never do that. I should never write again. Like, I am not that good. I could never make this happen. I should just quit. And so that people are reading my books and saying, I could do that. I'm not exactly, I think that's just maybe more of a positive outlook on life than I have personally. But I mean, anything that gets people reading and writing, hooray, that's the best.
Sarah would like to know, how does it feel that your books have had such a big impact in other people's lives?
I mean, it's just kind of crazy to me because obviously it impacted me a lot, especially that first day of writing where I realized how much I loved creating the story myself because I'm a huge reader. And I always thought that was the best thing, was a really good book. But then writing a really good book is even better than reading one. And it's always, if you're excited about it, it's always a really good book to you, whether anybody else thinks so. And so knowing that other people responded in the same way, it was so specific to me. It still blows my mind.
Mercedes would like to know, if you could change one aspect of your Twilight experience, what would you change?
I don't know that I would change anything. I mean, I guess there have been little negatives with, I mean, like, I guess the leak of Midnight Sun's a good example where if there wasn't so much scrutiny, that would have never been a thing. Like there are manuscripts all over the internet, no one looks at them. So it wouldn't have been a big thing in that. And so that there's little things like that. Scrutiny is hard for me. I'm a kind of quiet person who prefers to blend into the shadows rather than be in the spotlight. So that's difficult, but those are such little things compared to having your books be so popular with people, having people love them, having people come up to you and saying, you know, your book means so much to me. It made me happier. It gave me something I didn't have. I mean, that's amazing. It made me want to read more. It made me want to write. I mean, how can you want to change any of that?
And it seems like from the outside, or being sort of close, but on the outside of it, the positives kind of outweigh anything. And knowing that so many people have become friends because of it.
I mean, that's a huge one
because of it.
That's one of those weird things, like maybe you dream, you have your book, and it's getting published, and I was like, maybe people read it. What if it's popular? What if it's a bestseller? But then you think, no, stop thinking like that. You're setting yourself up for a fall. But with all of like the wildest dreams, maybe someday they'll make a movie of it. How fun would that be? The big wild dreams. You never think maybe people are going to find friendships through this that last their whole lives. Like that never occurred to me.
Yeah.
But I found a friendship that's going to last my whole life, and I know a lot of other people who haven't. And what a weird thing that it connects people. Mm-hmm. But awesome, I love that.
Yeah. Natalie wants to know if there's, you've touched on this a little bit, but any plans to write an entire new book series? Yes.
I do have plans to write, and I don't know if the next one I write will be a series or a standalone. I do have a little bit of a thing when I finish a book that the stories keep spinning in your head. It just keeps going. So it's hard to stop. I have one in mind that I think would be a standalone, but we'll see, right? I don't know how many more series I'll do. Series are hard because for me to write, I have to kind of be in my own place and think to myself, no one's ever going to want to read this. Knowing that people are going to read it is difficult for me. And so when I'm writing something no one's ever heard of that doesn't exist yet, it's easier than writing something that people are like, oh, I'm excited for the sequel and I already have expectations for it.
Yeah. Sequels are hard. A standalone is fine as long as it's, pushing 1,000 pages. That's all I'm saying.
Thanks.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure. I mean, you almost got there on that one on Midnight Sun.
Well, if Midnight Sun had been, if the font was the same size as the Twilight books, it would be 1,000 pages.
Ooh, it's a long one. What are some books that have influenced you the most? And what kind of literature do you enjoy reading the most?
I like everything.
That's from Arnika.
That's a good question, Arnika. I have the books that I read as a child that were super formative for me. I loved Anne of Green Gables. Jane Austen was a big part of the books I read. But then at the same time, I also love fantasy. And my dad had all the David Eddings books, and I have read through those many times. My recent books that I've fallen in love with are Laini Taylor's Strange the Dreamer duet. I mean, it's so good. And then at the same time, I also love Martha Wells's Murderbot Diaries so much. Like really quick little reads, and the main character is a non-gendered killing machine with social anxiety. And I just feel that character in my soul. You never know, but I love everything. I love fantasy and sci-fi. I love historical dramas. I don't read romance as like a genre thing, but I love it in my other genres.
Yeah. Do you have any comfort reads? Like what is your go-to comfort read?
Go-to comfort read is Rainbow Rowell's Attachments. Something about the way she writes, her characters feel really real. And it's just, I mean, it's not a perfect world. Like bad things happen to Lincoln. He despairs, but it's a soft story. Like it's a kind story. And so, and I just am happy when I'm reading it.
I would encourage you all, if you haven't read any of those books, to
seek them Rainbow Rowell's books are so worth cracking open.
Laini Taylor. They're
yeah.
all great. This is from the last two questions. This is from Diana. What do you think is the future of the novel and literature in these uncertain times and new technologies?
Well, I'm trying to remain hopeful that the uncertain times will get better and that this is not a permanent state of being, because it's not nearly as much fun to talk to you on a computer screen and not really see your faces or feel like I'm with you as it is to go to another country and see people and meet them and sign their books and look them in the eye and have that connection. I much prefer that way. So I'm hoping that that's a world we can return to. If it's not, I mean, the future of the book is everything, right? Because what other medium can be created totally in isolation? You don't have to have actors together to do that. And then nothing transports me like a book does. So for me, that's my preferred form of entertainment. And if I have to be stuck inside for a long period of time, I'm going to need more books. Like one of the reasons I did Midnight Sun now, because it was ready to go out in April, and then we hit the pause button because the world was in such turmoil. It's like, do we publish the book now, or do we wait until people are in a happier place? But then as it's the quarantine's grinding on, it's like, I need more books to read. And if I feel that way, other people feel that way. So let's get it out there. So at least there's one more book to read.
Yeah. Okay. Christina, this is a good wrap-up question. Twilight was published in 2005, and it was addressed to the young adults at the time. 15 years later, you wrote Midnight Sun, which is dedicated to all the readers who have been a part of your life. What sort of advice, it's two-pronged, what sort of advice would you give them now that they're adults, and what advice would you give to the teens of 2020 that are so different from 2005? That's true.
I mean, for my readers that have been with me the whole time, I hope that they're in that good place. I know life keeps going forward, but when you're 18, 20, there's so much that's not decided. But I felt like by the time I was 30, I was on my path, and while things go up and down, like I knew where I was. So I think it's easier for us old people, right? Because not everybody's on their path, but I feel like a lot of people have made the decisions that lead them to where they're going, and things can shake that up, and you have to start over again, which is rough. But hopefully you're in a place where you feel comfortable with your life and you know what you want from it. I mean, for the 2020 kids, I've got one. I've got a high school graduate who now has to decide, can I go to school? You know, will I get sick and die if I try and go get my education? Do I have to sit around for a year and do nothing? It is such a difficult thing for you guys right now. And so I think the main thing is, you know, hold on. It feels like forever, but it will pass. And I think everyone's going to be in the same place when it's done. So nobody's getting ahead right now. Just be really safe, and make the right decisions so you have that future. Everything you can to stay safe, and know that with patience, like, it's going to come. It's going to normalize. It will have to normalize, and you'll be able to go to school and pursue whatever your dreams are, whether it's throwing pottery or playing the flute or whatever it is. Don't give up on those dreams. I know it's hard to find space for them, but keep that creative element in your life, whatever it is that you love, keep it there, keep creating, because that's what the world needs, is creators and not destroyers.
And vote, register to vote.
Well, whichever country you're in, if you have an election.
Yeah.
The biggest change you can make, obviously, is getting involved in the decisions of who runs your country. So please do vote.
Yeah. Okay, guys. I think we've covered most of the questions. We have gone over on our time. So yeah, that's it.
Well, thanks for coming to hang out with us. I know this is a little weird. I hope you feel like your questions were well answered, and that you can feel us reaching out to you, because we're trying. I know it's difficult, but hopefully we can see you in person in the future. And thank you so much for supporting the books and for being a part of this, like, amazing fictional journey that I've gotten the fun of creating, and that people want to share it with me is just an amazing, amazing thing. And I thank you so much.
And maybe when we're allowed to travel again, can start making the rounds again.
Yeah. And do this for real. But thank you so much. And thank you, Method, for making this happen. We appreciate that. And hopefully we'll get to see you in the future. Be safe.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.